Now, born in 1950 in the Arat Kilo district of Addis Ababa, Wosene Worke Kosrof is a contemporary artist who's achieved international acclaim. Formerly trained at the Addis Ababa School of Fine Arts, he completed a BFA with distinction in 1972. He's not professionally known as, he is professionally known as Wosene, and over the past 4 decades has created an internationally recognized artistic signature in his work by being the first contemporary Ethiopian-born artist to use the script form's fiedel of his native Amharic as a core element in his paintings and sculptures. And Wosene joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. And it's said that jazz improvisations underlie your compositions. Tell me how.
Yeah, well, you know, jazz has been a long time interest to me. I went to Howard University in Washington. It's actually a black university where I first was introduced to jazz and really become sort of somebody that I can speak to in the studio. You know, it's a very lonely environment in the studio as an artist. And you can't basically have a person sitting there and talking to you while you're painting. Maybe some do. But for me, the jazz has a much deeper sense of, you know, its instrument that speaks to me, and
it's also got that sense of rhythm that you can. That you can. Does that come across in the work that you do?
It definitely does. You know, the Amharic writing, as what we call the fiedel, has been, you know, one of the really innovative language in Africa in its own sense. And as a first Ethiopian-born artist, also having to use that, I found the writing does tell a lot of story about love, sadness, confusion, and all that. And these paintings definitely talks about food, our culture, our heritage to the maximum where it has been and where it's going. And the Amharic fiedel, the way I am interpreting it, is really showing a global feel of, you know, complex interpretation of the sound, what the jazz happened to, you know.
And we're looking at some of it on the screen now. It looks absolutely fascinating, and I can see how that jazz element, you can see that sort of element of rhythmic movement and sort of that masterful use of color there. But I mean, traditionally, Wosene, African children, and I'm sure it's the same thing in Ethiopia, are brought up to aspire to be sort of doctors and lawyers, or some sort of profession, engineer. My child's an engineer, and that sort of thing. I mean, how did you fight against that grain to become an artist?
Well, I tell you, you know, it's never been very easy for kids like myself who grew up literally on the street and really came through to, you know, either in England right now or in the United States. I work hard through that. I learned a great deal of what is about other cultures, other living ways and ways of anything, whatever. And I think through the sense of that, I traveled by, of course, a lot of people helping me, but I'm always open to learn about. It's never been about Ethiopia only. It was all about not only Africa,
but human experience.
The human experience.
Well, I'm glad you became an artist, because I do rather fancy your work there. But I've read that you don't use sketches to start off your paintings. How does that work? Yeah,
you know, I did that in my undergraduate study. You know, you do a portrait, you sort of sketch it out, and then, you know, you're coloring and all that. But further down, I say, well, you know, sketching is by itself its own original work. Why do I have to repeat it with another painting over? So what I do is I'm an improvisational artist. I improvise things by destroying and building process. I have no answer to the end. I have no starting point to start. I'm always collecting information on the street. I like drinking coffee. I'm out in the street. I watch people. I watch your tie. I watch your face. I watch cars. So the accumulated information somehow would filter into my studio to see how I will process.
That sounds absolutely amazing. And why did you choose to work with Amharic script?
Well, you know, I grew up, you know, in a Coptic Orthodox church, and there's always a church images, you know, St. Mary, St. George the Dragon, and my painting. But, you know, earlier I sort of really a little bit tired of naturalistic painting, so I moved to see something abstract, which I thought the classical Ethiopian painting would possibly help me, which has the Mary and St. George the Dragon, the writing. But further down and at Howard, I was told maybe to leave Mary and St. George the Dragon alone and use the writing as no ever other artists in Ethiopian or anywhere else have been used. So that's how I actually end up into the fiddle as a major concept.
And you talked about being inspired by jazz. Are there any particular jazz artists?
I love John Coltrane. I mean, I love Miles Davis. I love very many. You know, as you know, I mean, the contemporary jazz or the time, the major of this jazz musician, basically rooted from the African local music, through the church, through kids playing, through even a time of days of people, and you know the way how people sing somehow rooted further down to the blues, and then how jazz somehow came out of that, and that is really what I think painting is for me, and it is a silent kind of a speaker to me. It advised me, which might sound kind of strange for people, but the jazz music really does give me a layer of interpretation of color, the tones, the weight, the letters.
And that came from your time in America. In America. I mean, was that the major influence that you got from America?
Well, that was one of the major influence. The other influence was to go back to home, which I never really know home where it was. Of course, I was born in Ethiopia, but to go back home and bring something from who you are was a great message for me. It wasn't combined of jazz music that somehow infiltrates through my work.
Yes, I mean, I think it's just absolutely marvelous stuff. I mean, how do you begin to put together these paintings?
Well, you know, in time, you know, I was a institutionally trained artist earlier in Addis Ababa, and then first at Howard. And you know, you're always exposed to other artists. You like their work. You go back to see who your culture is. You go back to the museum. I went to so many museums in the United States and also in Europe to see a lot of European artists. But further down, to say the gallery that I'm actually showing, Gafra, right here in Cork Street on 45 Malbert Street, has opened the past, you know, its door for the past 2 years, and really has been, and
that
you know,
is brilliant.
Such a combination of environment.
I have to stop you there.
Yes.
Wosene, thank you very much indeed. We appreciate your coming in.